Today we are going to learn what is standard deviation. There are so many YouTube videos on standard deviation, but all of them seems too much complicated. Today I'm going to teach you in simple terms what is standard deviation. Standard deviation is a number that tells us how spread out the values in a data set are. It gives us an idea of how spread out our data is in the chart from our mean. Okay, so in comparison to the mean, how different the data is or how far away the data is from the mean. Okay, so standard deviation gives us an idea of how far our data is from the mean or how much spread out the values are in the data set. Standard deviation. So there are two types. If there is a small standard deviation, it means that the data points are close to the mean. So there is less variation, right? So there is less variation between the data points when there is a small standard deviation. When there is a large standard deviation, data points are so spread out over a wider range, which shows there is a more variation. Okay. For example, imagine you and your friends take a math test, and these are the scores 80, 82, 79, 81, 83 from group 1, and group 2 has 60, 90, 75, 85, and 70. Both the groups might have the same mean, which is the average score. Let's say it is 81. Okay, but group 2 has a larger standard deviation. Why? Because the score are more spread out. See, in group 1 the data is between 79 to 83, whereas in group 2 the data is between 60 to 90. So there are more spread out scores in group 2 in comparison to group 1. So we can see clearly that group 1 has a small standard deviation, which means there is less variance between the scores. And in group 2, there is a large standard deviation, which means there is more variance between the scores. This is the formula for standard deviation. And I know it looks very complex, but don't be afraid. It's very simple. See, so X here means each data point. If you can see my mouse, if you can see my pointer, this X means each data point. Okay. This is X bar, which means average of the data, average of the data set. This is N, which means number of points. Okay. And this is sigma, which means sum. And this whole formula, it means sum of the square differences from the mean. Okay, so what is the sum of differences in square from the mean? Okay, so in simple terms we are going to find the average mean of the numbers. Okay, we are going to find the average, which is the mean of the numbers. Then we will subtract the mean from each number and square the result. We will subtract the mean from each number and square the result. Then we will find the average of this square differences. Okay, and then we will take the square root of that number. Okay, now you are thinking, why is standard deviation important? It is important because it helps us understand how consistent the data is. It helps us compare different groups, like are two classes performing similarly in tests. It gives us an idea, okay, how, let's say, division A is performing comparison to division C. Okay. Identify outliers, values that are too different from the rest. It helps us that which values are very different from the rest, right?